8th.
We have a phone number in the waiting room, 543-5361.
Oh, I do. No.
What are those numbers, Marty?
543-5361.
Hopefully things go better tonight.
Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Brave new world.
Does anybody have any idea who 0 to 5 Montana is?
That Grace
not.
Decker.
By the name, it sounds like Grace Decker.
Likely on the public hearing on our action plan.
That's true.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will call the Missoula City Council meeting of June 8th, 2020 to order. This is a virtual meeting of the Missoula City Council, and there are a number of ways to reach us. Those methods are attached to our agenda, and I suspect Ms. Rabine will share that virtual meeting information, which is up now, a variety of ways to contact us this evening. I will note that all council members are present, and Ms. Rabine, if you will, sorry. When you share your screen, everything gets a lot of whack on my screen. Thank you very much. We do not have minutes to approve, but we do have a schedule of committee meetings, Ms. Rabine.
Thank you, Mary Angan. So committee meetings this week will be held virtually, just like we are tonight, same meeting ID. And they're carried live on MCAT. Folks can tune in by watching us on eScribe, which is our agenda solution. And that is located, if you click the meetings button on the city's main webpage, that'll take you to our portal for all city council committee meetings. And we also stream these meetings live on the city's YouTube channel. So the Public Works Committee will meet this coming Wednesday, June 10th from 10 o'clock in the morning to 10:35. Parks and Conservation will follow from 10:40 to 10:55. Committee of the Whole will follow from 11 a.m. until 12:15. Committee of the Whole is actually pulling a double shift on Wednesday, and so they'll meet again at 1 o'clock to 2 p.m. Administration and Finance Committee follows that from 2:05 in the afternoon to 2:45, and Land Use and Planning Committee will round out the day from 2:50 to 4:20. Council members, if you looked at the committee schedule, we had to amend that today, so Land Use and Planning is switched to the afternoon. And Parks and Conservation and Public Works have gone to the morning. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Are there any changes to the committee schedule? If so, please let me know by raising your hand in the chat. Seeing none, we'll move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. And in this virtual environment, you are welcome to comment on any of the items on the agenda this evening. Ms. Rabine has once again posted that. And we have two folks in our waiting room. I will begin with a caller. Hello, caller. You are on the air with the Missoula City Council. Hello, caller. Hello, caller. We'll wait a moment for the feed to catch up. Caller, can you hear us? Caller, you are on the air.
We can't hear you.
Hello, caller, we cannot hear you, but I can hear myself talking to you. Hello, caller, we cannot hear you, but I can hear myself talking to you. Hello, caller. Hello, caller.
Do you have many callers on?
We just have you.
Do you have many callers on? Oh, so this is all right. This is Bob Oakes. I'm
So
getting the echo now.
So, Mr. Oakes, if you can mute your other devices, most likely the television or the live stream.
Hi, is that better?
Yes, sir.
So I'm just, I was just on to join if needed down the line. I don't have any public comment.
Okay, thank you, sir. I am going to return you to the waiting room, and I imagine you're on for the community plan. Yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, I will call on you again during the public hearing if you have anything to say, but I'm going to put you back in the waiting room, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we don't have any other public comment this evening. Oh, now we've got some rolling in. All right. Hello, caller. You are live with the Missoula City Council.
Yes, sir. All right, I will call on you again during the public hearing. Put you back away. Thank you.
Hello, caller. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Hello. You're on the
Hi.
air with the City Council.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's some lag from my feed. Yeah, my name is Beverly. I submitted a comment in regards to like the militia presence downtown. Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I basically just wanted to talk about, it sounds like there are two of us. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry. Yeah, I am just like concerned about militia presence downtown. I know that several folks have been like threatened and harassed, and it seems like there's a lack of police presence or like police response to those things. Last updates I heard, the reports that have been filed to the PD hadn't been followed up with, and that's things that started like over a week ago. And so I'm wondering whether anyone on city council is like willing to condemn that sort of behavior, and like what the public health and safety plan is for addressing that, whether there's like a task force being created or something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And the other comment this evening. Hello, Ms. Decker, is that you? Ms. Rayline, I cannot unmute this call. Ms. Rayline, you're on mute.
I've asked them to unmute. So the person that's just been admitted, you're coming in is 0 to 5 Montana as your name. If you want to unmute and give your public comment.
There you are.
Sorry, this is Colin Woodrow. You just let me in. I'm presenting later.
Oh, okay, Colin. Well,
My apologies.
you're just fine. We're going to continue to attempt to master the technology here. I see no additional callers in the waiting room, so we will move on to our consent agenda. Ms. Rayline.
Unmute me. Okay, tonight's consent agenda. I think we have 9 items tonight. And as always, the first item is to approve claims, which are the city's accounts payable. My computer's over here on the left, so I'm not going to look like I'm looking at everybody, but I am paying attention. So we're approving claims in the amount of $681,010.23 for checks that are dated June 9th, that's tomorrow, 2020. Number 2 is to set a public hearing on July 13th, 2020 on a resolution to amend the Missoula sewer use fees to follow industry standards for wastewater rate design and establish the fees based on water consumption. Number 3 is a 3-parter. It's a minor subdivision called the RMB subdivision. And the first part of this is to approve a variance request to section 3-030.2A2 for the RMB minor subdivision. And this is a variance request for the city's subdivision regulations to allow block length of more than 480 feet, subject to the recommended conditions of approval and findings of fact in the staff report. The second part of this item is to approve a variance request to section 3-020.5A for the RMB minor subdivision to allow Veterans Way, which is a street and subdivision, to be built as a dead-end street, subject to the recommended conditions of approval and findings of fact in the staff report. And the third part of this item is to approve the RMB minor subdivision as provided in the preliminary plat application and supplementary materials based on the findings of fact and subject to the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. Number 4 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign an agreement to continue pharmacy services with Navitus. The administrative fees associated with this agreement are $2.49 per member per month, and that's for the city's health plan. All right, number 5 is to approve minor changes to a lease agreement with the Missoula Art Museum. Number 6 is to approve the contract with Dorsey and Whitney to act as bond counsel for the upcoming 2020 series wastewater refunding and revenue bonds in the amount of approximately $45,000. That fee is dependent on the final cost of the bond issuance or the bond sale. Number 7 is to adopt a resolution of support for the Missoula Downtown Heritage Interpretive Plan. Number 8 is to award the bid for the City Hall remodel project phase 2 to D. Lauer Construction of Missoula, Montana, the low bidder, in the amount of $138,500, and authorize the return of bid bonds. And finally, number 9 is to recommend the mayor sign the professional services agreement with WGM Group for transportation engineering services term contract in an amount not to exceed $50,000. Mayor Engen, I think you're muted. I'm going to unmute you.
I am muted, sorry. Ms. Merritt?
Marty, I apologize for not letting you know about this earlier. I need to abstain from voting on item 5.9 if you want to just have that heads up beforehand. Thank you.
I got you already.
And Mr. Hess?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to highlight the RMB subdivision. I misspoke last week in indicating that it's a public hearing, and actually this is a procedure that does not require a public hearing. However, public comment has been open for the last week anyway on this item. I think that it's a really straightforward subdivision. The conditions of approval were agreed upon by the city and the applicant, and they were duplicative of conditions that we already adopted for the annexation back in December. So just wanted to get that into the record that it's this is a project that has long been contemplated in the build grant area, and it's moving forward in the way that we had always expected.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Ms. Cheryl?
I just wanted to, I don't want to divide anything, but I wanted to thank our finance department and Lee, and there's some additional details put into the claims this week, which I think was really nice for the public and, you know, also for us, although we look into them in more depth, but I just appreciate that there's more detail in the claims.
Further discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we have no one in the waiting room to comment. We'll have a roll call vote.
Thank you. Grab the right mouse here. Anderson.
Yes.
Anderson votes yes. Becerra.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Harp.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes, with abstention on 5.9.
Noted. Thank you. Ramos.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
Von Lossberg.
Yes.
And West.
Yes.
That is 12 ayes on items 1 through 8 and 11 ayes and 1 abstention on item number 9.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Consent agenda is approved. We have no comments from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, or the community forum, nor do we have any special presentations this evening. We do have one public hearing. And as you'll remember, our updated public hearing procedure is to receive a staff report this evening, and we will hold the public hearing open through the next council meeting for folks to comment in a variety of ways that you can see on your screen at the moment. And with that, we will have our staff presentation this evening from Mr. Woodrow.
And I'm here. This is Karen Gasfoda. I'm going to share my screen. I'll get that pulled up.
Sorry, Karen, you're providing the staff report?
Colin Woodrow and I will both be presenting the report tonight.
Great, thank you. Colin, you may be on mute if you're attempting to talk.
Are you seeing my slideshow there?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually going to start the report. So yeah, I'm Karen Gasfoda, Grants Administrator with the Office of Housing and Community Development with Colin Woodrow, Grants Administrator 3. And we are here to present the annual action plan and funding recommendations for CDBG Home and CDBG-CV CARES Act for the program year 2020. Each year, the city of Missoula receives HUD funds and has been an entitlement city for CDBG since 1999 and a participating jurisdiction for home since 2003. As required by HUD, we have prepared the program year 2020 annual action plan, which details how Missoula will disperse these funds to benefit Missoula's low and moderate income residents and leverage resources to improve the supply of affordable housing, public improvements, and public services. CDBG funds can be used for community development activities, including the acquisition of real property, relocation and demolition, rehab of residential and non-residential structures, construction of public facilities and improvements, and public services. CDBG funds must meet HUD's 3 broad national objectives to benefit low and moderate income households and or persons, prevent and or eliminate slum and blight, or address other community development needs having a particular urgency. Home funds can be used for affordable housing activities, rehab of owner-occupied housing, assistance to home buyers, and acquisition rehab for construction of rental housing. The home program is designed to provide housing that is affordable to low-income community members with an annual income that does not exceed 80% of the area median income, which in Missoula is $58,650 for a family of 4, or $41,100 for a one-person household. For the previous 5 years, our annual CDBG allocation averaged approximately $529,000. This year's CDBG allocation is $576,954. For the past 5 years, our annual home allocation averaged approximately $335,000, As you can see, the home allocations have more variability than the more consistent CDBG award. This year's allocation is 394,193. 394,193. The annual action plan and the eligible projects recommended are built around the 4 goals of the 2019 and 2023 consolidated plan. The development and preservation of rental housing that has affordability requirements, the creation and preservation of homes that are affordable for Missoulians, the expansion of our capacity to address homelessness, and the assurance that these goals are being met. The progress we make toward these goals are reported to HUD annually through our consolidated annual performance evaluation report.
As Karen has noted, our consolidated plan and annual action plan address 3 primary housing goals, and it should be noted that our community does face difficulties with housing affordability. In regards to homeownership, the median home price has increased from $200,500 in 2010 to $315,000 in 2019, for an increase of 57% over 10 years. The income needed to purchase that median price home has increased from $57,226 to $98,123, while the median family income for a 4-person household went from $61,400 to $73,313 over that same decade. These numbers show that while incomes have risen, they have not kept pace with the increased cost of homeownership, making homeownership out of reach for many Missoulians. Additionally, approximately 21% of homeowners are cost burdened. In regards to rental, per the Missoula Organization of Realtors 2020 annual housing report, the median income of Missoula's renters sits at around $37,500, and 48.2% of renters spend 30% or more of their income on housing, making them cost burdened by definition. Approximately 53% of Missoulians are renters, so nearly 1 in 4 Missoulians is rent burdened. And then in regards to homelessness, while Reaching Home and the Coordinated Entry System have made great inroads, we still have high rates of those who are unhoused, underhoused, and suffering homelessness. The number is fluid, but on any given day, at least 350 people are experiencing homelessness in Missoula. The majority of people experiencing homelessness cite the inability to afford rent as the primary reason for becoming homeless, followed by domestic violence. It must be noted in the last 5 years, through the implementation of the strategies outlined in Reaching Home and through Coordinated Entry System, we have seen significant progress. The system is working to ensure homelessness is rare, brief, and one time only. Thank you, Karen. To the slide, Karen. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Guided by our citizen participation plan, our department performs an annual community needs assessment and a community meeting to review the preliminary results of the survey and obtain further feedback. All comments, including any from this public hearing, will be included in the annual action plan submitted to HUD. Providing for best practices as outlined by HUD, our annual action plan includes an open and transparent application workshop, as well as pre-applications to ensure our community receives projects that are eligible and of high quality. All right, thank you. Okay, thanks. We received 767 responses to the online community survey from all neighborhoods, with high participation from the University District, Heart of Missoula, Northside, and Franklin with Fort. The creation and preservation of affordable housing and housing assistance are routinely the most supported efforts which can be carried out using these federal funds. Assistance for rentals and down payment follow this. It should be noted that the city does help operate a home buyer down payment assistance program through the Human Resource Council, which is funded by the Montana Department of Commerce. Our scoring criteria is a mix of both quantitative and qualitative components. Scores are averaged across the review team. This year, HCD received 4 applications, and the review committee met to rank those projects and establish review the grant packages, the guidelines, and determine the top ranking projects for this recommendation for funding. Thank you. These are our home recommendations. The first project is the Trinity project, which is being recommended for $806,000 of home investment partnership funds. The Trinity project will create 202 new homes that Missoulians can afford to rent. This is through a partnership with Homeward, the Missoula Housing Authority, and Blue Line Development, as well as the state of Montana, the city of Missoula, Missoula County, lenders, private foundations, and of course, the low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC, funding source. This is a $40 million project that exemplifies the cost of creating affordable housing, which is extreme and demanding, while also demonstrating the remarkable results of an innovative collaboration and partnership. Land for the Trinity was generously donated to the Board of County Commissioners. $500,000 of the Montana Department of Commerce state home funds will go to the Cooley Street site, and $2.5 million of the Montana Department of Commerce's National Housing Trust Fund dollars will go towards the Mullen Street site. Trinity is a significant project that succeeds in working towards multiple goals identified in Reaching Home, Missoula's 10-year plan to end homelessness, as well as goals identified in the Master Jail Diversion Plan and Missoula's housing policy. Trinity will provide some rare options for 3 populations underserved in Missoula: people struggling with chronic homelessness, people who have barriers to safe and healthy homes, and people who are earning more than 60% area median income, but not more than 70%. Missoula Housing Authority is providing 30 project-based vouchers to subsidize rents for the 30 one-bedroom apartments that will serve the chronically homeless. And a navigation center will be located on the Mullen Street site to provide access to supportive services that will work with the programs already in place to help divert people from unnecessary hospitalization or incarceration and help combat chronic homelessness for the people that are experiencing those challenges. Further collaborations will be made to provide appropriate services and support for the residents of the Navigation Center and those living in the workforce apartments. Income and rent restrictions will be required at the Trinity for a minimum of 46 years. A deed restriction will be recorded on the property to ensure this. Construction is estimated to begin spring of 2021 and to be completed by 2023. The other project recommended for home funding is our Choteau Community Housing Development Organization operating expense for $19,700. Missoula is fortunate to have 2 Choteaus, including Homeward, which has been a recognized Choteau at the state level since 1998. At least 15% of home funds must be set aside for specific activities related to current projects. These operating funds are providing staff development, asset management work on the Trinity project, and efforts to create another small home project like the homeownership project that was created on Montana Street. Thanks, Karen. The first project recommended for CDBG funding is the YWCA Meadowlark project for $400,000. The YWCA Missoula is building the Meadowlark, a 36,000 square foot fully accessible facility that will include rooms for unsheltered families, as well as a domestic violence shelter located at 1800 South 3rd Street West. Zoning allowed for this facility as a conditional use. The total project cost is estimated at $13 million, which will include a construction estimate of around $8 million. This project was funded in part with $350,000 of our program year 2018 CDBG and $450,000 of state of Montana CDBG funds in the same year. The Meadowlark addresses the growing number of homeless families with children and survivors of domestic violence in our community. Missoula has an average of 50 families with 110 children homeless every night. The Meadowlark will provide public services targeted to those experiencing homelessness in the community, including overnight shelter and supportive services to help individuals navigate the resources available to them. Additionally, as the primary access point in one of the primary access points in Missoula's coordinated entry system, the Meadowlark is a vital part of the effort to address the needs of homeless families by offering diversion, intake, crisis stabilization services, housing stabilization assistance, and ultimately permanent housing rent assistance and support. The requested CDBG funds will allow the YWCA to start operations in 2021 without the burden of long-term debt. This is a critical need because government funding for emergency shelter for homeless families is limited to begin with and decreasing. The Meadowlark will double the capacity to serve families in Missoula. The second project recommended for CDBG funding is the Clark Fork Commons for $175,000. This proposed project is for the preservation and maintenance of existing affordable homeownership housing stock in Missoula at Clark Fork Commons, 1401 Cedar Street. The roofing project will be organized and managed by the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, a designated community-based development organization on behalf of the Clark Fork Commons Homeowners Association. The majority of the homeowners are under 80% area median income, and as a community land trust, 24 of the 25 units will be limited to the purchase by income qualified HUD-eligible households, ensuring the property maintains homeownership that is affordable for Missoulians. Construction will start as early as possible.
And up to 15% of CDBG funds can be allocated for public service projects. The projects recommended here have been funded in the past, and they are not new projects. 4 projects are being recommended for CDBG public service funding. The Poverello has 2 projects, a housing retention specialist for $15,000 and a rapid intake services for $24,000. The housing retention specialist provides one-on-one support to help chronically homeless individuals stay housed and works closely with the homeless outreach team to communicate with Missoula Housing Authority, case managers, prospective current landlords, and other community service providers. Rapid intake services at the Poverello provide people with immediate resources for finding employment and housing, as well as medical or mental health services, public benefits, or substance abuse. Intake assessments also provide staff with critical information about new residents' needs and challenges. Also recommended is funding the YWCA's ADA's Place for $24,000. ADA's Place is the only emergency housing program for homeless families in Missoula that allows them to remain in the same location while enrolled in the program. Families are assisted through referral, personal advocacy, case management, and support services, and by providing short-term emergency motel vouchers and 50-day emergency shelter with the ultimate goal of achieving permanent housing. And the last recommendation is for Homeward's financial, renter, and home buyer education and counseling for $18,000. Homeward meets the clear community need to support people living on low to moderate incomes through home buyer, financial, and renter education and counseling to help families and individuals attain sustainable home ownership and financial independence. We also have included admin and planning in the action plan, which is considered best practice by HUD to allocate up to 10% of home or $39,000 and 20% of CDBG funds or $115,000 of our program year 2020 allocations to be used to support the administration, planning, and management of the CDBG and home programs. 4 staff members of our office help operate these funds, and employment costs are partially paid for using these funds. And in early April, Missoula received notice of a special allocation of CDBG-CV funds of $339,000 to be used in response to COVID-19. This was authorized by the executive actions of the CARES Act and Montana's declaration of a state of emergency. HCD was in the process of preparing and submitting our annual action plan for program year 2020. And we were able to include plans for using CDBG-CV funds in this action plan. The CARES Act provides flexibilities to make it easier to use CDBG grant funds for coronavirus response and authorizes HUD to grant waivers and alternative requirements. HUD guidelines allow for a 5-day public comment period for amendments and new plan submissions, permit virtual public hearings, and uncap the percentage of CDBG funding for public services. States and local governments may reimburse costs of eligible activities incurred for pandemic response regardless of the date, so long as costs comply with CDBG requirements. Recommendations included helping to stop the spread of COVID-19 citywide by supporting outreach services and appropriate supportive services for homeless individuals in isolation and quarantine in compliance with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention guidance. So HUD emphasized swift implementation of CDBG-CV funds. So HCD used a streamlined allocation process. as directed by HUD to garner the help of local experts who deal directly with disasters. HCD approached and coordinated with the local COAD task force to identify the most pressing needs in the community for COVID response efforts, and those activities that did not have any other federal funding resources available. The Missoula County Office of Emergency Management formed the COAD Homeless Task Force in response to the pandemic. Members of the task force include medical experts, healthcare providers, homeless service providers, and emergency management staff. The COVID task force collectively identified the community's needs that were eligible for CDBG-CV funds and sent a letter outlining those funding priorities to HCD. HCD then worked directly with the agencies to ensure eligibility and capacity to complete all requirements. During this process, HCD obtained documentation for each project, including budget narrative of intended outcomes and CDBG compliance. COVID funds are gap filler funding, and in order to prevent duplication of benefits, grant funds must not replace FEMA, SBA, insurance, or any other major form of assistance generally available to applicants. HCD performed a duplication of benefits analysis as part of its applicant review for eligibility of each organization and activity. Our process and approach to the duplication of benefits analysis included developing a funding matrix detailing all known available federal resources, performing an independent verification of other funding sources available for each applicant and activity, documenting the total cost of proposed activity, excluding components funded through other methods known at the time of submission, and requiring applicants to complete a certification document showing all other available funds for the applied for activity. Because we have not yet seen the full effects of the pandemic in our state or community, HCD will reassess for unmet need later in the year as necessary.
The COAD Homeless Task Force would like to recommend the following critical projects for funding at this time in response to the pandemic. Missoula City County Health Department, temporary public health social worker for $82,000. This position will provide unsheltered homeless individuals placed in COVID-19 quarantine and isolation support through daily wellness checks and ensure isolation adherence support. The social worker will collaborate with the registered nurse and community partners to provide continuing support services and rehousing efforts. The Poverello Center COVID-19 Outreach Response Team for $161,000. This team will work with the unsheltered population by providing in-field COVID symptom screens, education regarding COVID and ways to reduce the spread, coordination between the COAD and the Poverello Center, and providing support to individuals who are unsheltered in Missoula with the resources and assistance they need to meet basic human needs and to move into stable permanent housing. The Poverello Center Emergency Shelter Sanitation Project for $96,000. This grant provides additional resources and staffing to ensure that the Poverello Center is in compliance with CDC cleaning guidelines. The goals of the project are to keep the coronavirus from transmitting, provide as sanitary environment as possible, and retain the Poverello's essential employees by taking every step possible to ensure sanitary work environments. CDBG COVID-19 funds will be used to pay for sanitation staff as well as COVID response equipment and supplies. Thanks, Karen. The anticipated outcomes for these projects in total will have lasting positive outcomes for our community, with support services to reduce the impact of COVID in our community, emergency shelter for families fleeing domestic violence, financial management, renter and homeownership education, rental units that are affordable for Missoulians, and the preservation of affordable homeownership, to name just a few. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gazvoda and Mr. Woodrow. With that, I will open the public hearing. We have one person in the waiting room, Mr. Oakes. Mr. Oakes, you are on the air. Mr. Oakes? Mr. Oakes? Mr. Oakes? And Mr. Oakes has left. With that, I will open it up to council members. Ms. Anderson, questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Karen and Colin. My question is regards to the number of homelessness that you cited in your presentation, Colin. Is that number from the point in time survey that was conducted for this year? And if I may follow up, I'll just say it now because it's state related. If so, yes, then how does that number relate to our point in time surveys in the years past?
Good question. That number was provided by Teresa Williams, our Reaching Home coordinator, and it correlates from our PIT count. If you'd like me to follow up and provide PIT numbers from year to year, where our office can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. All right, and I know we'll be talking more about that as the numbers come out. I just didn't know if you happen to have that because I think it's an important metric to be tracking. So thank you.
So I will tell you that we have had point in time survey counts approaching 1,000, so we have made good progress. All right, further questions? Ms. Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colin and Karen, I was wondering if you could just enlighten us. The number of projects that you present tonight for approval for both our home and CDBG funds. I was wondering, out of all the what is the total number of projects that have been submitted in the past in terms of what have you vetted out of that list to get to where you make these recommendations?
Yeah, good question. In this year, we received, we did only receive 4 applications for CDBG and for home, and the CDBG-CV, the COVID response funds. Those three, the 3 prioritization priorities as identified by the COAD, those projects were identified, and only those three projects did apply for those funds. In years past, yeah. Do you want me to give you historical context or?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I'm curious to know, like, over the years, is it pretty much one and the same group of nonprofits that are applying for these particular grants and they keep coming back because they are so good at delivering on the metrics that we're seeking? Just a little context.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, our department, our office, we are operating on a new con plan. So this is a new 5-year con plan, which sets new goals and new priorities. Only a few years ago, right now we have 3 goals. And in years previous, this office has had as many as triple that count of goals. And so but under HUD guidance, and determination and best practice, the idea is to limit the number of goals so you can actually hit your marks and see progress made. So they've requested that all states and entitlements reduce the scale of the goals of a community. And so we focus on rental housing development and home ownership and homelessness. And those are the key areas that we've identified as a community. So over the years, the number of potential eligible applications has narrowed, partly because we're on a new con plan, and that we're trying to focus and leverage the funds that we do have available from these federal resources more specifically and more accurately at the issues that we face. So the numbers the number of applicants has dropped. And we also do in our pre-application process, I think that the technical assistance that we provide early on in the process does allow a number of agencies and organizations that come in early who may be interested understand that unless they create some affordable housing, or if there is not an affordability component, or they don't work within coordinated entry system or address homelessness, that some of the applications that would otherwise not be eligible, we are catching them before they spend the time submitting a full application.
Great. Thank you very much, Colin. Appreciate the context.
Further questions from council members? Right, seeing none, Mr. Oakes is back again. We're going to try this one more time. Mr. Oakes. Mr. Oakes?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, yes, sir.
So I'm here just to answer any questions if council has any. I'm sorry you got cut off right at the...
No problem at all. We're all adjusting to technology. Any questions for Mr. Oakes? I don't see any. Thank you, sir, for your patience and for calling in. All right.
Thank you.
The public hearing will remain open until next week's council meeting. We have no additional action to take there, nor do we have any additional public hearings. Move on to communications from the mayor. I will pass this evening and I will go through general comments from council members based on how you're appearing on my screen. Ms. Cheryl.
I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Mr. Von Osberg.
Thanks. Three things, and I'll try to be brief. First, I wanted to recognize that we've had multiple people contact us feeling uncomfortable and unsafe down around the courthouse. We had public comment to that earlier tonight. And this isn't a lengthy response to that other than to say, I certainly appreciate that feeling. I have spoken to a gathering of people along with one of my colleagues, Miss Merritt, while there were folks with various types of weapons in the background. That is legal for them to do, despite how it might make people feel relative to feeling safe or unsafe. Council has certain, and the city has certain powers in respect to what can be allowed and what can be prohibited. We exert those like almost all of the major Montana cities relative to places like City Hall, council chambers, polling places, and city parks. So this is a long-winded way of saying there isn't an action that I see that we could take to respond to those concerns. I'm happy to follow up with the person who called in earlier in the meeting and explain that in more detail. So despite the fact that I think many of us on council are sensitive to those concerns, we are limited. And most importantly, I would point people in the direction of the upcoming election and initiative LR 130. I think it's something people should be looking into and understanding how, if that passes, our ability to limit firearms in places like city council and courts and city hall and city parks will be stripped away from the city as well. So it's a good opportunity for people to educate themselves about initiative LR 130. Secondly, I wanted to just acknowledge briefly the messages and emails that we are all getting on council. I appreciate the fear, the concern, the anger, and at the same time, the hope for change and an optimism around opportunities for change going forward. We will be having a committee of the whole meeting on Wednesday at 11 o'clock with Police Chief White. Chief White hasn't had an opportunity to even meet the council because he started right when the pandemic started. We'll have him there for a conversation, introduction, and a conversation about his first few months on the job and certainly opportunities for, well, work that's already been going on in the department, as well as opportunities for change going forward. We're not going to solve the nation's problems in an hour and 15-minute committee of the whole meeting. I obviously recognize that, but I think it'll be a good first step before some subsequent meetings in both public safety and health with Ms. Anderson and Ms. Merritt, as well as our budget meetings. So wanted to acknowledge those messages that are coming in, and that is it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Campos. I think you said pass. Mr. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to kind of piggyback on what President von Lossberg said. I just wanted to state that I truly do appreciate the passion for more limited government that we are getting in these emails and calls to defund the police, although I do not agree with that concept. I just wanted to state a couple of things very briefly. I just wanted to state first and foremost that for our officers here in Missoula, it hasn't gotten any easier to be an officer. The pay still isn't great compared to what some folks can do in the private sector. It's still a risk to go out there each and every night on the force. People are still not kind to the officers here. They call them pigs. They always have to be cautious of where they go out to eat. They have to go to places where the food is prepared in front of them so people don't spit in their food. Obviously, I was as furious as anybody about what happened with Derek Chauvin, and I think that he will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but that doesn't mean that all the officers are bad. And that sounds like a cliche, but I just wanted to stress that I know many, many officers here on the force, and I've talked to them, and they're as disgusted as you and I are about what happened. And every single person on this council that does not agree with police brutality. In fact, we condemn it, but so do every single police officer on the force in Missoula that I've spoken to. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what a lot of the officers do. A lot of the officers in Missoula, they don't actually focus on enforcement that much because there's so many things to do. I've been on many ride-alongs, as have a lot of my fellow council members, and a lot of that is responding to drug overdoses, to car accidents, to health emergencies, to domestic violence disputes, all of that sort of stuff, and they truly are protecting and serving. They're not just sitting parked out trying to ticket people for drugs or traffic offenses. They're really doing the best job that they can. I did want to say that in addition to that, I mean, the council and I certainly have our disagreements, but I have full faith and confidence in every single council member, including the mayor, when it comes to respect our police department. Everybody cares deeply, deeply, deeply about this issue and takes police brutality or any incident incredibly seriously. In addition to that, we pay a ton of attention to the training of our officers, to the selection process of our officers, and that is the way it is. I don't know what else we can do. I think there are some things we can do around training, but again, every single person on this council, that's one of their highest priorities. So I did want to talk about something that's really been weighing in on me, and I think that in the event of George Floyd and a lot of these officers are tasked with enforcing laws and ordinances that they didn't themselves create. It was actually the government and the legislative bodies that created that. So if we want to defund anything, instead of that, why not look at narrowing the focus of police officers, which I know this council's tried to do. I mean, look at the case of George Floyd. He was essentially accused of having a counterfeit $20 bill. And what is a counterfeit $20 bill? It's essentially printing money out of thin air, creating money. And I say that because it's ironic that at the same time he was killed brutally by an officer for that crime, the federal government was printing trillions of dollars out of thin air, counterfeiting all kinds of money. So I think that at the end of the day, we have to really look into this and hold the government to the same accountability as the citizens. The fact that this poor man was stopped in the first place over something like this and then had somebody kneel on his neck for 8.5 minutes, I think is truly disgusting. And there are certainly things that we can do with the local government, but defunding officers is not one of them in my opinion. So thank you for hearing me out, and thanks everybody for what you do on council.
Ms. Burrow.
First of all, I was going to say, I think Mr. Ramos has very sadly misunderstood the messages that we're getting that we've gotten probably, I don't know, 75 or 100 messages today from people. They're not asking us for less government. They are asking us to reallocate our existing funding to services that do more to prevent crime, thus reducing the need for law enforcement action. So I think it's a misnomer to say that what they're asking for is less government. I also wanted to share a public comment from a member of the public who has been a long-time citizen of the city of Missoula, and that's Ethel McDonald. And she wanted to thank us for our leadership and support for the citizens' rights to peacefully assemble and redress grievances. She wants us to continue to provide direction, as well as thanks to the police department for their continued example and actions to keep the peace. And of course, now and in the future, to treat all people respectfully and without undue force, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, or gender preference. And that would, again, was from Ethel McDonald. And I'm going to take just another minute. I hope you all will bear with me. My comments last week, I think, got completely garbled, so maybe I'll do a little double dip tonight. I want to share a thought from Desmond Tutu. The quote is that stability and peace in our land will not come in the barrel of a gun, because peace without justice is an impossibility. In this light, I'd like to also share my concerns, as Mr. Von Lossberg did, about the many members of the community that are afraid to go downtown to the courthouse and take part in the protests because of the number of individuals who are down there carrying firearms. While I fully recognize that open carry is completely legal in our state, I also know that because of the gaping loophole in our background check laws, that we as members of the public have no assurance whatsoever that those who are openly carrying those weapons passed a background check to get them, or that they're even holding them legally, because they don't have to go through a background check. And we have no assurance that none of them have any training with those weapons. It only takes a moment of a misjudgment or a mistake for there to be an intentional or an accidental discharge, and for someone to be seriously injured or killed. Last Monday night in Boise, Idaho, a man was arrested after his weapon discharged while he was openly carrying his weapon at a Black Lives Matter protest in Boise. Thankfully, no one was injured. That could very easily have been a different situation. I've heard from many folks that the presence of these armed individuals has made them feel unsafe, to the point that although they would like to take part in the protests, they fear for their safety and they're choosing not to participate. That means these voices are not being heard. They are not able to exercise their First Amendment right. So I have to ask, what good is coming from the presence of all these deadly weapons in our downtown? The bogus rumor that white vans full of armed terrorists are going to show up in Missoula and start looting our downtown has been thoroughly debunked, despite the fact that it is being spread by former members of our state legislature. Our police officers don't appear to need assistance from private citizens to protect the protesters or the downtown property. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask that those who would like to be downtown, and whether you're taking part in the Black Lives Matter protest or observing it, that you just put your guns away. The officers are there. They have assured us that they are keeping a close eye on this situation. And I have every faith that our police department has this thoroughly under control. Thank you.
Ms. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight I'm going to read a letter I've written to my Habitat for Humanity community. And for those who may not know, I was named Executive Director for Habitat on March 23rd here in Missoula. All of us suffer. Suffering has a purpose of a lifelong lesson in endurance, character building, and hope. However, the magnitude of suffering for people of color is off the charts compared to those of us nestled in white privilege. Yes, we experience poverty, but we do not walk to the corner grocery store in fear of being pulled over because of our whiteness nor our poorness. We do not fear our sons not returning from a run. We do not fear the police will kneel on our necks. We do not fear a public lynching. We as Habitat staff, who it must be acknowledged, all speak from a place of privilege as white individuals, are filled with anger and sadness at the killing of fellow American George Floyd and the systematic racism and oppression that prevails across our country. We are empathetic to your cause. We stand with those who lend their voices and presence to raise awareness of any assault on human dignity and also act to eliminate it. Since our beginnings for Habitat for Humanity, we were an interracial farming community in Georgia. Our home building mission is grounded in the idea that in order to survive and thrive, people first need to feel safe and be able to support and trust one another. While we cannot fully understand what is being felt or experienced by others, our hearts go out to all people of color who suffer from violence, injustice, and the effects of inhuman and unacceptable attitudes and actions. Our hearts are shattered. Cannot be bystanders to hate or disrespect directed at Black individuals and communities. We cannot be silent and we cannot be complicit in this hatred. We are heartbroken that it even needs to be said, Black lives matter. We work against racist agendas and ideologies every day by demonstrating that our religious voices and values of building shelter through strength, stability, and self-reliance are purposely intended for all in our community. We are proud of the diversity in our growing number of partner families, our volunteer base, and our community. And no matter our faith, we all aspire to uphold the golden rule, treat others how you wish to be treated. We will not allow hate into our hearts, nor fear, resentment, or violence. As part of our commitment to being part of a positive change, we strive to educate ourselves to effectively act as allies to all who feel marginalized and contribute to a safer, more just, and equitable world. We must dismantle the oppressive systems and be tireless in our actions. And we must pray. And when God commands us to love our neighbor, we must listen. Thank you.
Ms. Vasika.
Thank you. We did get a lot of those emails that came in minute after minute throughout the weekend. And so I'm hearing what they're saying. I can't agree with it. I do stand with the police officers in the city of Missoula, in my hometown. I grew up here. And we can all agree that the police brutality and police corruption is absolutely horrendous. And we can all agree, everyone on council, I can assume that everyone on council, the mayor, everyone in the Missoula Police Department, all agree that police brutality and police corruption is absolutely horrendous and should not be accepted on any number of ways. However, we must not persecute the many because of the actions of the few. I promised that I would not take away funding from the police, fire, roads, and schools when I was elected into office. I take that promise very seriously. In this time when the nation is trying to divide, I will not accept that. I will uphold my oath of office and I will fight to keep funding for the police. They're underfunded, they're underappreciated, and they're absolutely overworked. If we want violence in our Garden City, then the answer is to defund our police department. I don't want that. I want a thriving, safe town that you can raise a family in without being in fear. And like I mentioned, I read many of those emails. I read every single one of them, although a lot of them didn't share the same phrasing. I just wanted to let everyone know that the police department does have my full support and I will not give up on them. I also will not give up on you, the town of Missoula. I love my town. I love everyone in it. And I promise to honor and cherish it when I said my oath of office. And I intend to keep that promise. And I'm looking forward to the conversation with Chief White this week to see how we can be a better police department in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just two things very quickly. I also want to acknowledge everyone who has been demonstrating and raising awareness about the change that we need in the systematic racism that plagues our nation. So I want to thank everyone who's out there, rain or shine, and for keeping at it and for keeping civil. I also, on a different note, I want to thank the city, county health department for all their work throughout this pandemic. And as we continue to reopen more businesses, I really appreciate the way they are handling and communicating the new measures to their community. Thanks.
Ms. West.
Sorry, having trouble unmuting. This going by your order on the screen keeps everybody on their toes. So I would like to speak of something completely different. So I just wanted to let folks know that there is a Poverello Center neighborhood cleanup coming up this Saturday, and that there's going to be a tree planting that is funded by the Trees for Missoula and MUCFA as a part of that, and some tree pruning of our urban forest. And if you want to be a part of the cleanup or helping pull invasive Siberian elm saplings, you can sign up on the Poverello Center Facebook page and come clean up the neighborhood. And then I also really look forward to the discussion on Wednesday with our new police chief. And in the run up to that discussion, I really recommend that folks check out the Washington Post Fatal Force website. It has, this website has been tracking civilian or police killings since 2015. It's probably the best set of data that I have found that tracks officer-involved fatalities across the nation. So since they've been tracking it, 1,041 people have been shot and killed by the police just in the past year. And it breaks it down by city, by state, by race, by some situational tags, whether there was mental illness involved or an attack or another weapon. And I really think that when we are talking about our local community, this is a useful tool. I think it's great to look at our state in detail and also our city and where we fall on this spectrum and in this larger, really important national issue. And I think that looking at this data really helps us have a productive conversation. So you can actually get the raw data and then sort it yourself if you want to. So take a look at it. It's available on the Washington Post website. So thank you.
Ms. Jones.
Oh, you timed that perfectly. My husband finally got his fax through, so now I can talk in my office. Lovely. I know that our council comments were garbled last week, so I just wanted to briefly circle back around and, well, there goes the fax. Try and just restate a few things. I think what's happened over the last 10, 12 days has been horrifying and shocking in our country, but it also is creating a really strong dialogue. And having seen this cycle numerous times, I am crossing my fingers and I am hopeful that this dialogue goes farther and there is change that comes from it. It seems to be different and I hope that happens. I've gone down to the peaceful protests several times and my kids have gone down. And I'd like to echo what Ms. Merritt said, that the people, for the most part, that are down at the peaceful protests are very peaceful. And frankly, there's a lot of information that's being shared and a lot of viewpoints that are being shared. There are also some people who are open carrying guns, and I don't think there's a need for it. And frankly, it stayed peaceful down in front of the courthouse in spite of those who are open carrying, not because of them. So I hope that that doesn't happen in the future. Our police are there being quite respectful, staying their distance, but there if necessary. In terms of us as a city, in the back of my mind, I think we need to be doing a review of our ordinances to make sure that we don't have anything either on its face or implied that is racist or discriminatory. And I'm planning on having a discussion with the city attorney regarding that. I had some other things on my plate and haven't gotten to that yet, but that seems like a logical, common sense thing that we should be doing. And I think it's also really culture, and our institutions need to work on culture, but also I think as individuals, we need to work on culture, and it comes down to being respectful and kind to one another. And so I know I can always do better. And I think this is not only institutional, but it's cultural and it's on an individual level. So I hope people are thinking about this as this dialogue moves forward. And I think that's all I got for tonight. But it's an interesting time to be in local government. It's an interesting time for me personally and my family to be raising young adults, teenagers and college kids. We're having a lot of discussions regarding what this all means and what we need to do as individuals and in this country. And I guess it's always darkest before the dawn. So I hope that we see some forward movement on all of this. And I'm sure Missoula should be part of that. And finally, I'm looking forward to the 11 o'clock committee of the whole meeting this Wednesday with Chief White, our new police chief, because he's got some really good ideas and some really positive ideas. And I think a good grasp of how to create good culture within a department. So since he started right after the pandemic hit, we haven't really had a chance to hear from him as a city council. So I'm looking forward to that on Wednesday. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Ms. West was right. We don't look the same on our screens as your screen, so we don't know when we're getting called on. But a couple comments. Many of my colleagues have highlighted the Wednesday at 11 o'clock meeting. I do hope the public joins in. I had the distinct pleasure of being on the interview committee that selected or recommended Chief White to the mayor. And I hope that the community will tune in and hear from him directly. I want to set the expectation that we are not going to solve all of the community and world's problems in an hour and 15 minutes, as President von Lossberg said, but I hope that you will feel that we are fortunate to have somebody who's very thoughtful, who brings a very unique set of skills to Missoula, and is somebody who is really looking forward to engaging in dialogue with our community. And we will continue to have those conversations, not only in the committee of whole, but in my committee of public safety and health, that this is just the first of many community discussions, and that you will find a chief who is thoughtful, compassionate, and really brings a wonderful set of skills to this job. And I think, as Ms. Jones said, really will bring, has a great view on culture and policing and whatnot. So please tune in, but know that it is just the first of many conversations. I also want to address the comments that in emails that we have received about the concerns of the folks who were open carrying and making people in our community not feel that it was safe to come out and have their voices heard in a respectful manner, and that there was some concern that the police department wasn't aware or wasn't there. And I want to assure the public that that is not at all the case. I had many conversations with the police chief last week. The police department was well aware of the folks. As some of my colleagues have stated before, you know, we Second Amendment is a part of our Constitution, and there are certain things that our community police department is not able to enforce, but they were there. You may not have seen them, but they were there. They were monitoring the situation. And at any point in time, if you felt that someone was saying harassing language or being, sort of stepping the line versus peacefully protesting, I encourage you never hesitate to call 911. The police were there. And I think that when I was downtown on Friday, their presence was a little bit more known, but they were monitoring the situation all week long. So I want to assure the public of that. I also really want to encourage the public, some of us have a love-hate relationship with social media, and so much of the misinformation last week was that some people were erroneously sharing, really kind of caused a lot of stir that was not necessary. So as those of us who participate in social media, please be mindful of what you're sharing, that it comes from a credible source, and don't traffic in misinformation or hysteria. We just don't need that in our community, and it doesn't help anybody. And I would encourage the former members of the legislature to heed my words as well. And also, if you are on social media, I do encourage you to follow the City of Missoula's page. The police department has a page. The chief and the mayor put out a video talking about the situation that our nation finds itself in. There's also been a kind of did you know fact that the police department is doing on their Facebook page to kind of answer a lot of the questions that they're getting right now. So please do tune into that. I find it educational, and I try to share when I can. So thank you for all that. And the final thing I have to say is that I know that our attention, and rightfully so, in the last 12 days have been taken away from the pandemic, but it is still here and it is still present in our country and our state. The state of Montana has added 9 new cases of COVID, not added, but positively tested in the last several days. So as you continue to be out and about, as you peacefully protest, I do really encourage you to social distance when you can, wear a mask. Montana has opened back up. We are allowed to see a lot of out-of-state plates, and I don't want a second spike to kind of set us back any farther or sicken any more folks than it has to. So please continue to be mindful of that. And there are still people suffering. Unfortunately, lots of them are Black and brown folks throughout our country, and who are disproportionately suffering the effects of COVID, which shows the holes in our healthcare system. But here in Montana, as Missoulians, please continue to do good due diligence and be mindful. And that's all I have. And thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for allowing us all the extra time to speak tonight.
Mr. Hess.
Thanks. I remain grateful to those who are dedicating so much effort to making our society more equitable and more just right now. And I remain committed to listening to those voices and acting with reason and compassion in the coming months. Thanks, everyone.
We have no committee reports this evening, nor do we have any new business. Are there any additional items to be referred? Seeing none, any miscellaneous communications, petitions, reports, or announcements? Seeing none of those, as always, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your service, and we will be adjourned.